one word describe that day? That's a good question.
Brutal.
Frigid.
Survival.
Cold. Really, really cold. That's more than one word, but it was miserable. How about miserable?
Not long ago, on the banks of the Ohio River, there dwelled a sleeping tiger. For the past 3 seasons, the Cincinnati Bengals lay dormant, waiting for a wake-up call.
Well, the great thing about the 81 season is the 80 season, we were 6-10. Forrest Gregg, new head coach, a lot of rebuilding going on.
No, Forrest was a very genuine coach. He was a player's coach.
He said, if you guys want to stay here, buy into what I'm going to do, and most of the guys did. So from 6-10 to 12-4.
And then out come the tiger stripes on the helmet. Guys were apprehensive at first. A lot of guys were.
I tell you the truth, when you wear a helmet like that, it's one of those situations you either got to put up or shut up. You either got to play or they're going to laugh you out of the league.
But boy, we come to love those striped helmets and the stripes, down the pants and up in the shoulder pads and everything that went along with it.
And then I see that they're going to new stripes and stuff. I'm like, I kind of like those. They look pretty good, and kind of gave us a different feel coming into the season.
I think that's the thing you take away from the 81 season. That's when the fans came out with the painted faces.
It was spectacular. It was so much fun. Who Day all of a sudden became a thing.
That's when the jungle became the jungle.
It was fun to be a Bengal during that time.
Well, it didn't start off well. If you remember, we're playing Seattle on opening day, and in the first quarter, I threw 3 interceptions. I think 2 of them went for touchdowns, and we're down 21-0, and I got benched.
Regardless of the score, regardless of the circumstance, never, ever, ever quit.
Turk Schonert came in and rallied us for a win. And then there was some doubts whether I was going to play the next week. And Forrest asked me finally what I want to do. I said, I want to start.
And then we go into New York, and Kenny gets his job back, and we got down 14-0 again, and we ended up coming back and winning that game. And I think guys started to believe that, hey, we could be pretty good here.
But the amazing thing is, halfway through the season, we were 5-2, playing pretty well. We went down to New Orleans, and we just got slapped around by the Saints. So now we're 5-3 at the halfway mark, really questioning, are we really that good? All of a sudden, the month of November was like unbelievable.
I think the key to that year was November.
The thing that I remember most about that season was the November to remember.
We had 5 games in the month of November, all against playoff contending teams, and we won all 5.
We went from a 5-3 record to a 10-3 record, and everybody's kind of looking at each other thinking, we're pretty good. We might be able to get something done here.
And I think that's when we really started to believe in ourselves.
But what we're seeing is the fruits of hard work, hard labor. Nothing was really given to us. Everything was done with our own blood and guts and with our own selves. We support each other, and now we have our fans supporting us in the media. It's really exciting.
The Cincinnati Bengals experienced a one-season turnaround that surprised even the most optimistic Bengal backers. As they stepped toward their first playoff game in 6 years, they could not help but look back at how far they'd come. The Bengals started the year hoping to escape their last-place syndrome and ended the season as the strongest team in the AFC. Riverfront Stadium had a whole new look, and a vast assortment of Bengal maniacs urged their team to stick it to the Buffalo Bills.
I think that was so special. We never had a home playoff game, the way the fans turned out.
I can't say enough about the fans in Cincinnati and the way they stepped up that year. But we're thinking, let's just win a playoff game and see what happens.
So what I remember about that game was that how consistent our offense and defense was. And so it turned out to be a very strategic game played that day, and we came out on top.
Not only do we win that first playoff game with the bye, but we're playing the AFC Championship game in our home stadium.
It was 55 degrees that day, as I recall. However, the next week was a little different.
Back in Florida, if it was 40 degrees back home, they were shutting down the state. I'm telling you, we didn't want no part of it. So this is something that's going to be totally new to me, and it's going to be interesting to see how the old Gator reacts to this thing here.
Well, it was bad all week. We didn't know it was going to be as bad as it was.
Oh, the day before the game, I had no idea I was about to endure the coldest day in Cincinnati history, much less play a game.
The temperatures was in the single digits all week long. Forrest Gregg was a tough guy to play for with great weather. This thing was, whatever you're going to wear in the game is what you're going to practice in. I had 2 pair of gloves on. I had the gloves that we put on that help keep water off your hands, and then I had a pair of street gloves, leather gloves, that I put on and I taped them up. And I was practicing all week long with these gloves on. Coach Gregg came up to me and said, ML. And I said, yes, sir. He said, you gonna wear those gloves in the game? And I told him, yes, I am. He said, well, you better not drop a ball. He walked away from me.
The site, Riverfront Stadium. The matchup, the San Diego Chargers and the Cincinnati Bengals. To the winner goes a conference championship and a berth in Super Bowl 16.
Chargers came into Cincinnati, and they weren't used to it. It shocked them. The owner asked if we would move the game to San Diego or play it, his fallback position was maybe you'll play it next week if we wait a while. But the answer to those was no.
It was interesting because that morning, routine, we're up, 20 minutes north of the city, and you have your pregame meal, man. You jump in your car. You're at home. You jump in your car. You come down. We park under the stadium. That morning, it was like nothing.
A lot of guys, their cars wouldn't start.
We can't start our cars.
A bunch of cars wouldn't start that day. Mine was one of them.
So we're like, okay, how are we going to do this?
So we gathered into the lobby of the hotel where the hotel management commandeered 2 of their vans.
We piled into the van, and actually they drove us to the stadium.
There was some prime beef in that van, man. That bad boy was loaded.
Here in Cincinnati, they are getting set for a game that they have waited for a long time. A championship game for their Bengals. It's the Central Division champion Bengals, 12-4 in the regular season against the Western Division Chargers, champions of that division with a 10-6 record. And here in Riverfront, the first title game in the 14-year history of the Bengal franchise. The folks here are ready for it. The no-shows, you'd be hard-pressed to find empty seats here today. It is cold, but the enthusiasm is real. And it is hot, and we're getting set for kickoff at Frigid Riverfront.
You talk about Riverfront Stadium. The atmosphere was unbelievable. I mean, even though it was just frigid cold, they were ready.
Riverfront Stadium became as big a home field advantage as any team had in the National Football League. When we came out and saw how many people came to that football game to watch us play in those weather conditions, that was a motivating factor.
They were excited. They was ready for this. I remember sitting in the locker room watching the linemen, the offensive linemen, getting dressed for the game. And they didn't put on long sleeve shirts or anything.
We decided as an offensive line right away, no sleeves. It doesn't matter how cold it is, we're coming out without sleeves.
It's in Bengal lore. I think we have to credit the great Dave Lapham with sending the linemen out there without any sleeves on.
I'm going to go out there with as little as I possibly can, particularly on my arms. I was playing against a guy by the name of Gary Big Hands Johnson. A big part of his game was to get upfield, swat, grab, and pull. We had gone sleeveless all season long, the offensive line. And we wore real tight jerseys and cropped our jerseys to our shoulder pads so there was no extraneous cloth to grab. So I'm thinking, that worked all season long. Why deviate from that? We all went sleeveless in that football game. And I think it was not only a physical advantage, but a psychological advantage. The Chargers were all bundled up, man. They had all kinds of things on their face, they had masks, and we came out sleeveless. They looked at us like we were mentally ill, I mean, I think it was a huge advantage.
When you see a really cold game and guys have no sleeves on, it's because of that game, the Freezer Bowl.
We know one thing, that the Bengals are wearing thermal stripes today. Can you possibly generate enough warmth to play effectively today?
Dick, I think you make adjustments to the cold. I don't think anyone can really adjust to this kind of cold. I think what we're going to see today, obviously people trying to fight against it, wearing thermal gear, and we'll see some interesting advances in that. But I think the the final breakdown on this game is who can survive this cold. It's a game of survival.
Well, the thing was, it was so cold, and we didn't have all this stuff they have today, the cold weather gear. And then Tom Gray has this couple big old boxes. He comes sliding into the locker room. TG, what is that? Well, come and look. So he opens them up. It's pantyhose.
I wore a pair of pantyhose. They said that it would help keep your legs warm.
But we're scrambling. We don't know what to wear.
It was a game of survival, there's no question.
They have the hot seats that have been transported to Cincinnati, both teams, the heated benches, which will help somewhat.
We had heated benches. It might be the first time they used heated benches, and that saved us.
Actual coils of actual fire that was underneath these hard plastic benches.
And I think it malfunctioned, and somehow Eddie Edwards caught on fire.
I said, Eddie, your uniform's on fire. He said, I don't care. I don't care.
I sit down on the bench and I'm sitting on my hands, and then they've got little slots for your feet to go in. And so all of a sudden, a couple minutes later, there's a roar in the crowd, and I go to stand up to see if there's a turnover and if I'm going back in. Well, I stand up, my feet don't come out, and I go down, and the first thing that hits is my face mask. I said, I can't get knocked out of the AFC Championship game falling off the bench. Now, luckily, there weren't as many cameras or cell phones in those days, because somebody would have caught it. I'd have been on Football Follies for the rest of my life.
To be obvious, I'd rather play at home than on the road.
That smile of Kenny Anderson gives himself away.
You better believe he's glad to be here on his own turf in front of his own crowd. Both coaches going to be hard-pressed today to find a way to cope with this situation, to find a way to win.
You're trying to survive the elements. I'm from the East originally, from New England, and I thought I could handle cold weather. Well, I didn't know what cold weather was until I got out on that field.
I had never experienced anything like that. I don't think anybody in the team had, when it's 59 below with the wind chill.
Well, I guess the biggest challenge was wearing enough but not wearing too much so you could move but staying warm. And you come out between series, and the first thing you want to do is you want to get the helmet off. You want to get the helmet off, you want to get water. That day, rule number one, do not take your helmet off. People talk about toughness. I look at it as mental discipline. You just got to buckle it up and say, man, I'm going to do whatever I need to do as an individual, as a unit, as a team, to win this football game. And I think that's what we did. We just endured.
I really believe in mind over matter. I knew that when you're in this moment, cold doesn't matter. The play matters. The circumstance matters. And you have to be all in, all focused.
Going out there in the first series, and felt like, all right, this is where you have to, you take the upper hand here, or they do.
Going to be intercepted. Oh, it was not. That ball just died out there.
You saw early in the game, and both Dan Fouts and I tried to throw, and there were a lot of flutter balls. Dan threw one early, and the wind got a hold of it, and not only did his receiver miss it, but our defensive back mistimed his jump because of the wind. We had the ball early, and I tried to throw a swing pass to Pete Johnson, which was a staple of our offense, and the ball just died.
He dumps it out in the flat. Oh, you can see again, that pass just died as he tried to find Pete Johnson.
We had a great offensive coordinator, Lindy Infante, and kind of figured out real quickly we could throw the ball in the middle of the field better than to the outside. So that was kind of what we featured in the pass game. And
it's funny because I hear a lot of, well, you guys are used to that weather, and I'm thinking, wait, no, you can't use that as an excuse. And you look at the kickers. We had Jim Breach, who did a phenomenal job kicking the football that game.
Little Jim Breach, 5'6", a size 5 shoe, is trying to nail a three-pointer from 31 yards away. And Cincinnati has the lead.
For Jimmy Breach to come up big in a big Bengal moment, no surprise. He did it all the time. He's the all-time leading scorer, 9 for 9 in overtime. He kicked a lot of huge field goals.
That was a performance that you have to have a ton of respect for, because I don't know how the heck he kicked that football, because it was like kicking a brick.
I'm trying to remember if he kicked one into the wind or everything they had was with the wind, because I know their kicker tried one into the wind and it just died and had no chance.
A long field goal try, 50 yards by Benerska, and it isn't even close.
And I think what happens a lot of times when you're in a situation like that, it might be uncomfortable. You might have to tolerate some things, but you have to be, mentally disciplined. Jim is one of those guys that showed that mental discipline, just being able to kick the football as well as he did that day.
And right down the middle. Breach is 2 for 2. Don't tell the Californian it's cold. He's been perfect.
I think we only threw it 18, 20 times, something like that game. Not nearly as much as we normally did, but, luckily we had a good running game and a good defense that day.
The defensive line, and I know the linebackers, we're going to have to stunt and blitz in there and try to throw the timing off of Dan Fouts and try to just put him on his back a couple of times like we did before.
Our defense was always tough.
The defense, amazing, getting the turnovers. In games like that, you need turnovers, especially with that type of weather.
Started the game in terms of turnovers with Rick Rosano.
And the Bengals lead 3-0. Brooks at the 15, the 20. Football! There it is! And the Bengals recover!
Rick Rosano made a big play. And Rick Rosano, he was broad and really muscular. He was a tough linebacker, man, hard-nosed, great guy. Tremendous football player, great football IQ, up for the challenge every single snap.
And I really believe that's when it kind of all changed and really solidified control of the game.
That was, the snowball.
And it set the tone for our mindset, which was, your ball can be our ball.
We knew if we took advantage of the turnovers that the game was going to be ours.
Touchdown! M.L. Harris. M.L. Harris, who came to Cincinnati with Forrest Gregg from the Toronto Argonauts. He may just like this kind of weather.
We run a lot of option routes where the tight end can go break in or out off of technique.
I would read the defense, and whatever way they was pressuring me, I would turn the opposite way.
And he ran a great route, and we scored first.
Before I even turned, Kenny had the ball in the air. And so when I turned around, the ball was right almost in my face. I could hear Forrest Gregg saying, well, you better not drop any balls. So I put my hands up to catch the ball, and the ball went halfway through my hands and hit my face mask. And that's where I was able to secure the ball. So I almost dropped the ball.
Again, it's amazing that we were able to do the things we were able to do in that kind of environment with the equipment we had.
I didn't do too many celebrations, but all I could do was hold that ball up. And I looked over and I saw Isaac Curtis, and his hands was up in the air, and he was celebrating, and Mike Wilson came over and gave me a big bear hug and lifted me up, and I wasn't light now. He lifted me up, and we ran off the field excited and said, let's go, fired up, ready to go.
Number 14, the guy with no gloves, the way he threw the football that game was just amazing. And that was one of the passes he threw to ML.
Kenny Anderson played unbelievably in that game.
His passes were sure, they were on time. And to me, if you're looking for a tape of why Kenny Anderson is a Hall of Famer, you have to start with that day.
We had no turnovers, and he threw the ball in that wind so well. It was one of the most spectacular performances I've ever seen by a quarterback.
Kenny Anderson at that point in his career was playing, in my opinion, at a Hall of Fame level.
People forget about Kenny Anderson was his ability out of the pocket. His rushing numbers among quarterbacks who are already in the Hall of Fame, he dwarfs them.
Kenny has a big hand. Kenny controlled that football. He threw the heck out of the football, man. Fouts was throwing floaters. Kenny was putting something on that football and throwing it accurately.
So he did a lot of communicating with his eyes, with where he put the ball location on you. I don't remember another quarterback like that.
He didn't wear any gloves, and he would keep his hands in his pocket, call the play, get to Blair Bush, and then pull his hands out. Not only was he an MVP for the season, but he was an MVP for that game.
As great as Kenny was, it was not a good day to throw. Pete Johnson was built for that day. The guy was a battering ram.
A human wrecking ball.
We got to put points on the board because then they're capable of scoring, almost any given point of the game. And we're going to have to keep our defense off the field, so our offense have to move the ball.
Can you imagine 59 below and you got a 260, 270-pound running back coming at you?
It's not a pleasant experience. He gave you very little hitting surface. He had good pad level. He ran with a forward lean, and people were falling off of Pete Johnson, man.
He was coming downhill. Anytime Pete comes downhill, you're in trouble.
When you're not going to throw the ball 30 times a game, you got to be able to run the football. And we did a nice job of controlling the clock, picking up first downs.
already chanting Pete, Pete, and he gets it, and he has a touchdown.
Everybody came to play, and that was the amazing thing. It didn't have to be Dan Ross. It didn't have to be Chris Collinsworth, but it was ML Harris. It was Don Bass.
Anderson going to throw. Touchdown, Don Bass.
Strong right 146 all cross. Don was open that day, and I threw that one pretty hard, and again, that was into the wind. I think that might have been his only touchdown catch of the year. It came at an opportune time.
Don Bass did not catch a pass all year.
Don Bass stepped in, and he makes a catch for a touchdown. And in the biggest game that year, leading up to the Super Bowl.
The final seconds in Cincinnati. McAnally gets his kick away. And when it comes down, the Bengals are champions. And the Bengal stripes, they really earned them, didn't they?
It was a Bengal day.
Yeah, it was a Bengal day, all right. It was our day. It was our day. We were not going to be denied by the weather or the team that we were competing against. It was our day.
What a privilege it was to play in that game, to be a part of Cincinnati lore.
I don't know if we were more excited about winning the game of going to a Super Bowl or going in where it was warm again.
Can I tell you what? It didn't feel as cold when the seconds were winding down. We're all standing up by the sideline. Nobody cared how cold it was. Because, man, we're going to the Super Bowl.
That was a pretty special day.
The team was, I think special is a really good word for it. I've got bonds with teammates on that football team that I'll have the rest of my life. I mean, they were like brothers, literally. It's like family. When I think about that football team, the first AFC Championship in franchise history. So there's no tie there. There's only one team that can do it. And the 1981-82 football team is the one for the Cincinnati Bengals, and Paul Brown was extremely proud of that fact.
Paul Brown, a man who knows how to win, almost as if he's trying to choke back a smile.
For Paul Brown, or coach as we called him, to have that win there at home, a franchise that he started in 1968, and to finally get to go to a Super Bowl, I mean, those are the type of moments that you're just thankful.
So this was the only thing he had not done in pro football, was take a team to the Super Bowl. I have no doubt that Paul Brown was floating on air.
To see him in the locker room, he was going around and he was shaking hands and giving people hugs and different things like that, which was not a norm.
If you want a real lesson in that, take a look at the big crowd behind me around Kenny Anderson. Talk about a man that handled the things when they were very difficult for him, and I hand it to him.
You know, it was nice to see him get to go to a Super Bowl as the owner.
He was a little bit like Forrest in that he expected players to perform. He had a very high standard, and you had to overcome whatever difficulty was in front of you, and that was just part of the task.
He instituted a mandate to win, to be the best. That excellence will be rewarded, and that champions are made, and he was in the champion-making business.
It was such a party atmosphere. You know, everyone was expecting something great and wanting something great.
You know, the fact they had as many fans as they did, I think probably caps off the 81 season in Bengals history, because the fans still showed up.
Our fans were committed, and I think that was an event that cemented the Bengals in the minds of Cincinnati as their team.